This week I want to look at what does it mean to be tried, and what does it mean to try God. We know what it means in English, but in Hebrew there's a few different words that are used, and it actually gives us quite an insight into how Yehovah sees trying people. In Psalm 26 we see a few words. We see, "Examine me, O Yehovah," and that word is Bahan, "and prove me," that's Nasah. "Try my kidneys and my heart." And I'm only going to look at the words Bahan and Nasah. The word Saraf is talking about refining. It's talking about trying in a different way. But what I want to focus on for the purpose of this video is what is it to Bahan and what is it to Nasah. Because God Bahans us, He Nasahs us, and we can also Bahan Yehovah, and we can also Nasah Yehovah. So we should be aware exactly what the scriptures are saying to us. The first word, Bahan, you see there in this section, the outline of biblical usage. All that is an explanation by blueletbible.org as to how they think the word is used. It's not like a definition or anything like that. It does have a definition down at the bottom, but sometimes the nuances of a word can be missed in the definition. So that's Bahan. The word Nasah, again, unhelpfully, in the outline of biblical usage, just says to test, try, prove, tempt. None of them are really all that useful. If we look at what Gesenius has to say, we see the entry for Nasah. Okay, this is the Hebrew word Nasah. It's a nun, a samek, and a hey. That's Nasah with the vowels. It says here to smell, to try by the smell. The primary idea differs from that of, and that's the word Bahan. That's a beit, a chet, and a nun with the vowels. It's Bahan, which is to try by the touch, as if to prove, by a touchstone. Okay, so two different senses of trying there. One is to try by touch, by feel, and the other is to try by smell. Think of if you found some chicken in the fridge and you wanted to see if it was good or not. You might give it a quick smell. Touching it really isn't going to tell you very much, but if you smell it, it will tell you something different about it. This is the entry for Bahan. Okay, to search out, to examine, to try, to prove. Again, that's the sense in which it's used, but it's talking about by touch, as we saw. We see here it says meaning to rub upon. Okay, so there's a sense of physicality to the word Bahan. You can maybe think of Bahan as to try something by experience, direct experience of that thing. The figurative implication is one of physicality, of actually touching something, of actually feeling it. It's different to smelling it. Smelling it will tell you something entirely different. A touchstone, which is the idea that Gideon says is implied by Bahan to rub on, or rub against. A touchstone you would use for materials like gold or silver. You would rub them on the touchstone, and then you would be able to test what is left on the touchstone, if you like. So they're the two kind of ideas. One is kind of like a direct experience of rubbing against something or feeling it. The other is to smell it. In Psalm 17 verse 3, it says, "You have Bahan my heart." Okay, and we see this quite often in Scripture. The other word which is used there is the word we saw before, seraph, and that has to do with refining something. So it does mean to try, just in a slightly different way that's unimportant for what I'm talking about in this video. But when it talks about Yahovah examining our hearts, the word that is used is Bahan. He tries our heart. He Bahans our heart. It's a direct experiential thing. Interestingly, in the book of Job, first we see Job say, does the ear not Bahan words? So it's interesting, there's the use of a sense. The hearing, used literally, the ear, when it hears words, does it not Bahan the words? It kind of feels the words. So Bahan is used to feel figuratively, and the ear, when you hear, that's used literally there. Later in the book of Job, we see Elihu speaking, and he uses the same words. He says, "For the ear tries words." I don't know whether this was a saying at the time, or whether he's just drawing upon Job's words, but you see, it says, as the mouth tastes food for itself, and he says something very similar. The palate tastes food. So the comparison is drawn by both of them. That as the mouth tastes food, so the ear feels words, gets a sense of how the words are. When your ear hears the words, does it not try them? But the trying is has a sense of physicality again. In Psalm 11 verse 4 it says, "Yehovah is in his set-apart temple. The throne of Yehovah is in the heavens. His eyes see, his eyelids Bahan the sons of men." So again, it's interesting that a sense, the sense of sight, again, literally here, his eyelids look upon the sons of men, and when he looks upon them, he Bahans them. He experiences the sons of men, of what sort they are. We see the other word, Nasah, used in 1 Kings 10. The Queen of Sheba, or Sheba, heard the report of Shlomo concerning the name of Yehovah, and came to try him with her questions. So you see, in the English, we don't get a differentiation here between trying Bahan and trying Nasah. So we think that they're similar things that are happening. The Queen of Sheba is examining Solomon. And we would think that as the same sort of way as Yahovah examines our hearts, perhaps, but it's not the same. The word Nasah, again, it's to do with smell. You often see this word when somebody is kind of questioning the veracity or validity of something. So again, they kind of give it a quick sniff to see whether it smells right, is the kind of sense that we get from the Hebrew here. So she came to try him with hard questions to see if what she had heard was legitimate. In Genesis 22, 1-2, we see God doing this to Abraham. It came to be after these events that Elohim tried Abraham. He nasad Abraham. He smelt Abraham to see if he was genuine, and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. And he said, take your son now, your only son Yitzchak, or your unique son Yitzchak, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering. So this is how he tried Abraham. He smelt Abraham to see whether or not he was genuine, would be another way of putting it. And the way he did it was he said, okay, well, if you believe me, then go and offer your son up, something that Abraham obviously wouldn't have wanted to do. And it would prove whether or not Abraham actually believed what was said. We should expect to be nasad, to be smelt by Yahovah also. In Deuteronomy 8, 1-2, it says, cherish to do every command which I command you today, that you might live, and shall increase and go in and shall possess the land of which Yahovah swore to your fathers. And you shall remember that Yahovah your Elohim led you all the way 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, to Nasah you, to know what is in your heart, whether you cherish his commands or not. And when we see Yahovah Nasah men, this is what he does. He checks to see whether they will, whether they have his word in his heart, which is in their heart, which is to believe his word, to cherish his word, to shamar his word, to keep his word. So he will check to see whether or not we cherish his word in our hearts by smelling us. Judges 2:22 says, in order to Nasah Yisrael by them. Okay, this is talking about the nations which were around Israel who gave them trouble, whether they would cherish the way of Yehovah in order to walk as their fathers, whether they would cherish the way of Yehovah to walk in them as their fathers, rather, as their fathers cherished them or not. So Yehovah tried them. In English, he did try them. That's kind of an aspect of what it is to Nasah. But if we have the broader picture, that it is to smell them, to see if they smell genuine or not, we get a better idea of how Yehovah sees the process of trying people. And the people grumbled against Moshe, saying, what are we to drink? And he cried out to Yehovah, and Yehovah showed him a tree. And when he threw it into the waters were made sweet. Then he made a chok and a mishpat, justice for them. And there he Nasah them. And then we get a little bit of insight into what that means. And he said, if you diligently obey the voice of Yehovah your Elohim, and do what is right in his eyes, and shall listen to his commands, and shall guard all his laws, or cherish all his laws, same Hebrew word, I shall bring upon you none of the diseases that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am Yehovah who heals you. So, again, we see that it's all linked to whether they cherish the word, whether they shema the word, whether they hear and obey the word. So he gave them the commandments to do, and then he tried them as to whether they would do it. He smelt them to see if they were genuine or not. Numbers 14:22, we see when we try Yehovah, it's the same word. They have tried me now these 10 times. Deuteronomy 6 verse 16 says, do not try Yehovah your Elohim as you tried him at Nasah. So again, it's to kind of approach something almost with skepticism, almost like you're just trying it out to see whether or not it is genuine. We are not to do this with Yehovah. Here we see in Psalm 78, they tried ale in their heart by asking food according to their desire. And they spoke against Elohim. They said, is ale able to set a table in the wilderness? So again, there's this kind of testing his genuineness, whether or not he can do as he has spoken. Look, he struck the rock so that the waters gushed out and the streams overflowed. Is he able to give bread also? Would he provide meat for his people? Therefore Yehovah heard and was wroth. So a fire kindled against Yaakov, and displeasure also came up against Israel. So again, they kind of doubt the veracity of what he has said. It's not a response of belief. One can try Elohim, as in one can Bahan Elohim. And what I mean by that is when you do the commands, when you cherish the word in your heart, you will have an experience of Elohim in response to that. If you Nasah Elohim, it's not a response of belief. Again, in English, we've got the two words as one, as try. So, can you try Elohim? You would think no, but it depends whether you're talking about Bahan or Nasah. You cannot Nasah Elohim because that's a response of unbelief. But you can Bahan Elohim, and that kind of describes our walks with Elohim as we implement his word and show that we believe his word. Then we will feel him, or we will have an interaction with him, or an experience of him, and we will feel that he is genuine. But we shouldn't be sniffing Elohim to see whether or not his word is true. In Judges 6:36-40, this is Gideon. It says, and Gideon said to Elohim, if you are saving Israel by my hand, as you have said, see, I am placing a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you are saving Israel by my hand, as you have said. And it was so. And he rose early the next morning and pressed the fleece, and wrung dew out of the fleece to fill a bowl with water. And Gideon said to Elohim, do not be displeased with me, and let me speak only this time. Please let me Nasah only this time with the fleece. Please let it be dry only on the fleece, and let there be dew on all the ground. And Elohim did so that night, and it was dry on the fleece only, but there was dew on all the ground. So we actually have Gideon here approaching Yehovah and saying, allow me to Nasah, allow me to see if you really are going to save Israel by my hand. Remember, he says that I am the least in my clan. Maybe he has self-esteem issues, but he doesn't just presumptuously Nasah Yehovah. He says, please forgive me. Would you do this thing so that I can know whether or not you're going to do this by my hand? It's kind of like disbelief at the fact that Yehovah is going to use him to save Israel. And so he asks for a sign, and that is described as him Nasah, as him finding out whether Yehovah will genuinely do what he has said. In Exodus 17 verse 7, it says, and he called the name of that place Meribah, because of the strife of the children of Israel, and because they Nasah Yehovah, saying, is Yehovah in our midst or not? So again, it's this seeing whether or not it is true, rather than an act of belief. If they had believed Yehovah and done what he had said, then they would have Bahan Yehovah, which we could translate as tried. They would have tried Yehovah, but it would have a completely different meaning. If they believed him and done what he said, then they would have felt Yehovah, and they would have known that he was real. They would have had an experience of him. He would have come and he would have provided water for them if they had believed that he was in their midst. However, their response is different. Their response is to Nasah. There is an air of unbelief, kind of, we'll give it a smell and see what it smells like. And Yehovah is enraged by this. In the New Testament, it says, then the devil took him up to the holy set-apart city, set him on the edge of the holy or set-apart place, and said to him, if you're the son of Elohim, throw yourself down, for it has been written, he shall command his messengers or his angels concerning you, and in their hands they shall bear you up so that you do not dash your foot against a stone. Yeshua said to him, it has also been written, you shall not try Yehovah your Elohim. So it's kind of like the devil comes to him and says, if you're the son of Elohim, throw yourself off because you'll be fine. We should never act presumptuously in thinking that Elohim will do something. If we act in belief in his word, that's different, and we will Bahan Elohim, we will feel Elohim in the results of our belief, but we should never presume upon something, we should never act in a way that we wouldn't normally if it wasn't for something that we knew about Elohim. So often you'll hear people say, I was living by faith. And what that actually equates to is, I didn't get a job. I didn't do anything to help myself. I just waited on God to provide for me, because he says that he's my provider. Or sometimes you'll hear people say that anyway. I've known people to say that in the past. But that's not having faith in Elohim and subsequently bechaning him because of it. It is to Nasah Elohim, which is something which we're not supposed to do. It's totally different to believing the word and seeing the fruits of obedience. That would be to bechan Yahovah, and thereby to know that he is genuine. It's on his terms if you do that. If you try to Nasah Elohim, it's doing things on your own terms and expecting that Elohim will fall in line with you. This is the word ekpirazo. Looks like ekpirazo. And you can see here, it says their understanding of it is to prove, test thoroughly, to prove God's character and power. But again, that's just their understanding. And I include the Greek word so that you can see, just like the English word try, this word is insufficient to describe what the Hebrew describes. There is nothing in this word that means anything about testing by smell. All of that is lost. This is obviously a quote from the Old Testament, and the word that is used in the Old Testament in the quote is Nasah, but it's just been exchanged for this Greek word. It's just as lacking as the English words are. You lose something when you take a Hebrew passage and translate it into another language, because the words are imbued with meaning which they do not have when they are in Hebrew. In Psalm 95 verse 9, we see these two words used together in an interesting way. When your fathers Nasah me, bechan me, indeed they saw my work. And in English, we can kind of think that it's saying the same thing. When they tried me, proved me, indeed they saw my work. But that's not what it's saying. It's saying when they Nasah me, when they tested whether or not I'm genuine, they questioned my character. When they did that, they bechan me. They experienced Yehovah. They felt Yehovah. Indeed, they saw my work. They died in the wilderness. That was how they bechan Yehovah. That's how they felt Yehovah, and it was a consequence of them Nasah Yehovah. Malachi 3 verse 10 says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, and let there be food in my house, and please prove me in this. Well, it's always stood out to me as a little bit weird that we are not to test Yehovah, and yet he says, please test me in this. in many translations. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying, please, Bahan me in this. Do what I've said in belief, and you will then see the consequence. You will feel me. And what he will do is he will open for the person who does this the windows of the heavens and pour out boundless blessing. That is how we Bahan Yehovah. We don't test him like the Israelites tested him. We experience him, we feel him as a result of our belief, of our obedience. We do not, however, Nasah him. And I spoke when I did Torah portion told out this year. You see in that Torah portion, I spoke about Yitzhak, Isaac, about how he is a picture of the father when he examines Jacob. And we can see that even more clearly with this understanding. Then Yitzhak said to Yaakov, please come near so that I feel you, my son, whether you are truly my son Esav or not. And Yaakov went near to his father, and he felt him, and said, the voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands are the hands of Esav. Of course, this is talking about being tested by the father, or alludes to, or is a picture of, at the very least. Us being tested by the Father are the things that we say and the things that we do in line with each other, or are we hypocrites? Do we speak as if we're Jacob, but the works that we do are the works of Esav? But what he does here is interesting. He feels him, just like he was Bahaning him. What Yitzchak does here could be described as him Bahan Yaakov, because he tests him by the touch. He sees how he feels. And that just as the Father does with us, remember, he Bahans our hearts. He Bahan our heart, rather. And then what do we see later? Just as Yehovah will Bahan us, just as he will Nasah us, he will test us by touch, and he'll test us by smell. We see he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his garments, blessed him, and said, see, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which Yehovah has blessed. So Yehovah will Nasah us, and he will Bahan us, just as Yitzhak did with Yaakov. When it says he smelled him, that him testing who this person was by smell could be described by the Hebrew word Nasah. Him testing him by what he felt like could be described with the word Bahan. So if we are tested by what we feel like, the things that we actually do in response to Yehovah's command, and we know that we are Nasah by him also, what is it that he is looking for? What should we smell of? Exodus 40:26-27 says, and he put the gold altar in the tent of meeting in front of the veil, and burned sweet incense on it, as Yehovah had commanded Moshe. And the sweet incense is a sweet fragrance to Yehovah, as in fact all of the offerings in the earthly tabernacle are. Here we see the grain offering described as a sweet fragrance. Okay, a sin offering wouldn't be a sweet fragrance because it would only be offered, sin offering or guilt offering, accompanied by sin. You would have had to have sinned in order to give those offerings. But when we bring a burnt offering, when we bring a grain offering to Yehovah, they are sweet fragrances before him, or a peace offering. And the instructions for the earthly tabernacle not only tell us about the earthly tabernacle, because the earthly is patterned after the heavenly, it also tells us what happens in heaven. We see in Revelation 8:3, we see an angel offering incense in heaven, and with it, the prayers of Yehovah's people. It not only tells us about what happens in heaven, it also tells us about ourselves. Okay, the offerings that we make, the spiritual sacrifices, are sweet fragrances to Yehovah as well. And we get a little bit of insight into this in the New Covenant writings. In 2 Corinthians 2:14-15 it says, "But thanks be to Elohim, who always leads us on to overcome in Messiah and manifest through us the fragrance of his knowledge in every place." Because we are to Elohim the fragrance of Messiah among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. So when we act in obedience, when we act in belief, it is the fragrance of Messiah to Elohim. So when he smells us, we smell correct to him. He will test us. He will try us by smell. And this is the smell that he's looking for. Philippians 4:18 says, "Indeed, I have all and more than enough. I have been filled, having received from Epaphroditus what you sent, a sweet-smelling fragrance, an acceptable offering, well-pleasing to Elohim." So their gift to Paul is described as an acceptable offering. It is a mincha to Yehovah. So that is what Elohim is looking for. He will feel us like Isaac did to Jacob to see if we're genuine, if we feel right. And he will smell us to see whether we smell right also. Yehovah willing, I'll see you next week.